The fluorescent lights in the underground parking garage flickered overhead, casting irregular shadows across the concrete floor. My heels clicked against the cold surface as I clutched my briefcase tighter, the leather handle slick with sweat despite the December chill. 3 cases worth of contracts weighed down my shoulder bag, each one representing another late night at Hoffman & Associates, another evening of translating legal jargon for families whose wealth I could only imagine in abstract numbers. I pressed the elevator call button with more force than necessary, my index finger leaving a slight impression on the worn brass. The digital display above showed the car descending from the 15th floor. 12. 9. 7. My watch read 9:47 p.m. Most of the building's occupants had left hours ago, their luxury sedans and chauffeur-driven vehicles long since departed for penthouses and estates I'd only seen in the glossy pages of the property portfolios we handled. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open with a mechanical whisper that seemed too loud in the empty garage. I stepped inside, my reflection fragmenting across the mirrored walls. Pale skin, dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could fully mask. Auburn hair pulled back in a bun that had started to come loose around hour 10 of my shift. I looked like what I was, a junior associate grinding through her second year, desperate to prove herself worthy of the partnership track that Carmen kept dangling just out of reach. I reached for the button marked G for ground floor, but my hand froze mid-air. A figure emerged from behind one of the concrete pillars, moving with the kind of fluid grace that made my breath catch. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been painted on, the jacket open to reveal a white dress shirt with the top 4 buttons undone, exposing a triangle of olive skin and the suggestion of muscle beneath. His dark hair was swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and classical proportions, except for the eyes. Those were modern, calculating, the deep brown of espresso with something dangerous swimming in their depths. Lorenzo Colombo stepped into the elevator before the doors could close. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was certain he could hear it. The elevator suddenly felt too small, the mirrored walls reflecting his presence back at me from every angle until it seemed like there were a dozen of him surrounding me. The doors slid shut with a finality that made my throat constrict. He pressed no buttons. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Buonasera, signorina Ferreira," he said, his voice low and textured with an Italian accent that wrapped around my surname like silk. "Working late again, I see." The formal greeting did nothing to ease the tension coiling in my stomach. I knew who he was. Everyone at the firm knew, though we never spoke his name aloud in the gleaming conference rooms upstairs. Lorenzo Colombo, head of one of Milan's most powerful families, the kind of family that didn't appear in any of our official client lists, but whose interests intersected with our work in ways that were deliberately vague. I'd seen him exactly once before, 3 months ago, when I'd been asked to deliver a sealed envelope to a warehouse on the city's outskirts. The instructions had been explicit. Hand it directly to the man waiting in the office. Ask no questions. Leave immediately. I'd followed those instructions, but I'd also seen, through a half-open door, what was happening in the warehouse proper. Men in expensive suits, crates being unloaded, stacks of currency that made my yearly salary look like pocket change. And Lorenzo, standing in the center of it all, giving orders with the casual authority of someone who expected absolute obedience. Our eyes had met for less than 3 seconds before someone closed the door. I'd handed over the envelope, turned on my heel, and walked back to my car with my spine rigid and my palms sweating. I'd said nothing to anyone. What was there to say? I was a junior associate at a prestigious firm. I handled estate planning for wealthy families. What happened in warehouses was none of my business. Except now he was here, in this elevator, and the way he was looking at me suggested he remembered that moment as clearly as I did. "Mr. Colombo," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I didn't realize you were still in the building. I had a meeting with Alice Taylor." He said my mentor's name the way someone might reference an old acquaintance, casual and familiar. She speaks highly of your work, says you have an excellent eye for detail. The praise should have pleased me. Instead, it felt like a threat. I do my best, I replied, shifting my weight slightly toward the elevator panel. The button for the ground floor glowed softly, mocking me. We should have been moving by now. Lorenzo's gaze flickered to my movement, then back to my face. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. You're wondering why we're not moving. It wasn't a question. The thought had crossed my mind. I kept my tone professional, the same one I used when negotiating contract terms with difficult clients. He withdrew one hand from his pocket, revealing a small black device, a remote of some kind. I thought we might benefit from a conversation, privately. The temperature in the elevator seemed to drop several degrees. My legal training kicked in automatically, analyzing options, calculating risks. He'd stopped the elevator deliberately. We were alone in an underground garage at nearly 10 p.m. No one else was in the building. My phone was in my purse, but would I have time to reach it? I wasn't aware we had anything to discuss, I said, proud of how level my voice remained. No? He tilted his head slightly, studying me with those dark eyes. You don't think about that evening 3 months ago? The warehouse on Via Manzoni? My breath caught, so we were addressing it directly. Part of me had hoped he hadn't actually recognized me, that I'd been just another forgettable face in a city full of them. I delivered a document, I said carefully. As instructed by my firm, that's all. You saw more than a document. Another statement, not a question. You're very good at maintaining a neutral expression, Renata. May I call you Renata? But I watched you walk back to your car that night. You were pale. Your hands were shaking when you unlocked the door. The fact that he'd observed me so closely, that he'd noticed details I'd thought I'd hidden, sent a chill down my spine. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. He took a step closer, not threatening, just present. The scent of his cologne reached me, something expensive with notes of cedar and bergamot. I'm stating facts. You witnessed something you shouldn't have, and yet you said nothing. Not to your colleagues, not to Alice, not to anyone. There was nothing to say. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze despite the fear curling in my stomach. I was there to deliver a document. I did my job. What else happens in that building is none of my concern. Exactly. His smile widened slightly, and for the first time, I saw something other than danger in his expression. Approval, maybe, or respect. Most people in your position would have gone straight to the authorities, or at least whispered to a colleague. But you understood the wisdom of silence. I understood the wisdom of self-preservation. The words came out sharper than I intended. I'm not naive, Mr. Colombo. I know what happens to people who ask too many questions in situations like that. Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at my directness. You think I would have harmed you? I think you would have done whatever was necessary to protect your interests. I gestured at the stopped elevator, at the device in his hand. Much like you're doing now. He was quiet for a moment, regarding me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A low, genuine sound that seemed to fill the small space. Carmen was right about you. She said you had spine. I didn't fully believe her until now. My mind raced. Carmen had talked to him about me? My senior partner, the woman who'd hired me straight out of law school, who'd promised me a partnership track if I worked hard enough. She'd discussed me with Lorenzo Colombo. I don't understand what this is about, I said, abandoning the pretense of calm professionalism. If you wanted to silence me, Surely there are more efficient methods than trapping me in an elevator. Silence you? He looked genuinely puzzled. Renata, if I wanted you silenced, we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would have simply disappeared. An unfortunate accident, perhaps. A mugging gone wrong. Milan can be dangerous for young women working late. The casual way he described my potential murder should have terrified me. Instead, it clarified things. He wasn't here to threaten me. This was something else. Then what do you want? I asked. Lorenzo studied me for a long moment, his expression shifting through several emotions too quickly for me to identify. Finally, he said, "Do you know what fascinated me about you that night? It wasn't your discretion, though that was impressive. It was the way you looked at me." I blinked. Most people, when they realize who I am, what I am, they look away. Or they stare with fear, or with the calculating greed of those who think they can profit from proximity to power. He took another step closer, closing the distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. But you looked at me with something else. Judgment, yes. Disapproval. But also curiosity. Like you were trying to understand rather than simply condemn. "I'm a lawyer," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Analysis is part of the job. It's more than that." His hand came up, not touching me, but hovering near my face. I forced myself not to flinch. "You see the gray areas, don't you? You understand that the world isn't divided neatly into legal and illegal, right and wrong. You know that sometimes the law serves justice, and sometimes it serves power." He wasn't wrong. I'd seen enough in my 2 years at Hoffman & Associates to understand that wealth operated by different rules. Contracts that would send an ordinary person to prison were perfectly legal when structured correctly. Assets hidden, taxes minimized, consequences avoided, all within the bounds of the law, if you could afford the right lawyers. "What do you want from me, Mr. Colombo?" I repeated, steadier now. "I want to offer you a position." He stepped back slightly, giving me space to breathe. "Not at my organization. I know you have too much integrity for that. But as a consultant, legal advice, contract review, the kind of work you already do, just for me specifically." I stared at him. "You're offering me a job. A lucrative one. Triple your current salary to start, with bonuses based on the complexity of the work. All perfectly legal, all properly documented. You would continue at Hoffman & Associates. Alice has already agreed to allow you to take on outside consulting work, as long as it doesn't interfere with your primary responsibilities." My mind spun. Alice had agreed? How long had this been in the works? Why me? "Because you're brilliant, because you're discreet, and because—" He hesitated, and for the first time since entering the elevator, he looked almost uncertain. "Because I find myself thinking about you more than I should. That look you gave me, that moment of connection before the door closed, it stayed with me. 3 months, and I couldn't forget your face." My breath caught. This wasn't just about hiring a lawyer. There was something personal in his words, something that both thrilled and terrified me. "I need time to think," I managed. "Of course." He pulled the remote from his pocket again, pressing a button. The elevator lurched into motion, beginning its ascent to the ground floor. But not too much time. There are complications developing. Situations that require the kind of legal expertise you possess, and I need someone I can trust. You don't know me well enough to trust me, don't I? The elevator dinged as we reached the ground floor. The doors slid open, revealing the empty lobby beyond. You've already proven your integrity. You saw something that could have destroyed me, and you chose silence not out of fear, but out of understanding. That's rarer than you might think. I stepped out of the elevator, my legs slightly unsteady. Lorenzo remained inside, one hand holding the door open. 1 week, he said. Think about my offer. I'll have Carmen arrange a proper meeting, somewhere less confined, somewhere you'll feel safer. I don't feel unsafe, I lied. His smile was knowing. No, you don't. That's what makes you perfect for this. Most people in your position would be terrified, but you're not. You're calculating, weighing options, considering possibilities. It's very attractive. Before I could respond to that loaded statement, he released the door. It slid shut between us, and the elevator began its descent back to the garage. I stood in the empty lobby for a full minute, my heart racing, my mind churning with implications and possibilities. Through the glass doors, I could see my small sedan waiting in the visitor parking area, pathetically ordinary next to the luxury vehicles that usually occupied this space. Triple my salary, legal work, all above board. The chance to work with someone who clearly saw my potential, who appreciated my skills in ways that Carmen, for all her mentorship, never quite had. But also, Lorenzo Colombo. A man whose wealth came from sources I couldn't examine too closely. A man who'd stopped an elevator to have a private conversation with me. A man who'd admitted to thinking about me for 3 months. Who'd called me attractive with that intense look in his eyes. I walked to my car on autopilot, started the engine, drove home through Milan's late-night streets without really seeing them. My apartment was small, a studio in a building that needed repairs I couldn't afford to request. I made pasta from a box, ate it without tasting it, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling until the early hours of the morning. The worst part was that I was actually considering it. Not just the job, but everything it implied. The door he'd opened, the world he'd offered me a glimpse into. I told myself it was just about the money, about the career opportunity. But I knew, with a certainty that made my chest tight, that it was more than that. It was about the way he'd looked at me. The way he'd seen not just a junior associate, but someone worth his attention, his time, his very specific and dangerous interest. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. Think carefully, Renata, but know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. And I'll still protect you. L. Protect me from what? I wanted to ask. But I already knew the answer. From the moment our eyes had met in that warehouse, I'd become entangled in his world. The only question was whether I'd acknowledge that entanglement, or continue to pretend I could remain on the outside, safe and separate. I set the phone down and closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I replayed our conversation, analyzed every word, every gesture, every moment of that brief, intense encounter. 1 week, he'd said. 7 days to decide whether to step through the door he'd opened, or to close it firmly and hope he'd actually let me walk away. The fluorescent lights in the underground garage had flickered overhead, casting irregular shadows. Now, in my dark apartment, I realized those shadows had followed me home. The next morning arrived with Milan's typical winter gray, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain but never quite delivered. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying makeup with more care than usual, trying to cover the evidence of a sleepless night. My hands were steady as I traced eyeliner along my lids, but my mind kept returning to the elevator, to Lorenzo's words, to the text message that had glowed on my phone screen until I'd finally turned it face down at 3 a.m. The commute to Hoffman & Associates felt longer than usual, every traffic light an opportunity for my thoughts to spiral. I practiced what I'd say to Carmen when I saw her, how I'd ask about her conversation with Lorenzo without revealing too much. But when I arrived at the firm's sleek offices on the 10th floor, Carmen was already in a meeting, her glass-walled office occupied by 3 men in expensive suits I didn't recognize. "She's been in there since 7, whispered my colleague Emily, appearing at my desk with 2 cappuccinos. She set one down in front of me, her expression curious. New clients, apparently. Very hush-hush. Alice has been in and out twice already. I accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. Did she say anything about them? Just that they're extremely important to the firm's future. Emily made air quotes, rolling her eyes. You know how she gets with the high-profile cases. Everything's confidential. Everything's urgent. Through the glass wall, I watched Carmen gesture animatedly, her silver hair catching the overhead lights. One of the men turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his profile. Sharp nose, graying temples, expensive watch. He looked like every other wealthy client we served, indistinguishable in his tailored armor. My phone buzzed. Another unknown number. But I knew who it was before I opened the message. The Marchetti case on your desk. Review it carefully, especially the property transfers in Section 7. L. My blood ran cold. I looked down at my desk, at the stack of folders Carmen had left for me yesterday afternoon. The Marchetti file was third from the top, a routine estate planning matter I'd been asked to review for errors before filing. How did Lorenzo know what cases were on my desk? I glanced around the office, suddenly hyper-aware of every surface, every corner. Was there a camera? Had someone been through my things? Or was the answer simpler and more unsettling? Did Lorenzo have someone inside the firm feeding him information? My fingers moved automatically, pulling the Marchetti file toward me and flipping to Section 7. Property transfers, as he'd said. 3 parcels of land on the outskirts of Milan, transferred from Marchetti Holdings to a subsidiary company I didn't recognize. The paperwork looked standard, the kind of corporate restructuring we handled daily. But then I saw it, a discrepancy in the dates. The subsidiary had been registered 2 days after the property transfer, legally impossible. The receiving entity had to exist before it could receive assets. Someone had backdated the documents. I sat back in my chair, my heart hammering. This wasn't just sloppy work. This was fraud. And if I filed these papers as is, I'd be complicit. The firm would be complicit. Another text. The subsidiary is owned by Nelson Ricci. The Marchettis don't know they've just handed over $40 million in real estate to their biggest competitor. Stop the filing. Nelson Ricci. The name meant nothing to me, but the implication was clear. Someone was using our firm to legitimize theft, and I was the junior associate assigned to rubber stamp it. My hands trembled as I set down my phone. This was exactly the kind of situation I'd feared. The gray area where legal work became something darker. I could pretend I hadn't noticed the discrepancy, file the papers as instructed, and let someone else deal with the consequences. Or I could flag the issue, ask questions, and potentially expose myself to whoever had arranged this fraud. Carmen's meeting ended. The 3 men filed out, nodding to Alice as they passed her office. I watched them enter the elevator, watched the doors close, and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Another elevator, another enclosed space where the rules changed. Renata. Carmen appeared at my desk, her expression pleasant but tired. Do you have a moment? I followed her into her office, the Marchetti file tucked under my arm. She closed the door behind us, a rarity in our glass-walled environment, and gestured for me to sit. I wanted to discuss an opportunity with you, she began, settling into her leather chair. A consulting position with a private client. The work would be similar to what you do here, but more specialized, and significantly more lucrative. So Lorenzo had been telling the truth about her involvement. The confirmation should have relieved me, but instead it raised new questions. How much did Carmen know about Lorenzo's business? Was she complicit, or just pragmatic? I received a message about it, I said carefully. Last night. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Quick work. Lorenzo said he wanted to approach you personally, but I didn't realize he'd already made contact. It was an unexpected encounter. I chose my words precisely. In the parking garage. Something flickered across Carmen's face. Concern, maybe, or calculation. I see. And what did you think of his proposal? I'm still processing it. I set the Marchetti file on her desk. But I have a more immediate concern. Section 7 of this filing. There's a date discrepancy that makes the transfer legally invalid. Carmen opened the file, her eyes scanning the pages. I watched her face carefully, trying to read her reaction. Did she know about the fraud? Was she part of it? Good catch, she said finally, closing the folder. I'll send this back to the Marchettis for correction. Thank you for the careful review. The receiving company doesn't exist at the time of transfer, I pressed. Someone backdated the subsidiary registration. Which is exactly why we review these documents before filing. Her tone was pleasant but firm, the same one she used to end conversations she didn't want to continue. You've done your job, Renata. Leave the client management to me. I wanted to push further, to ask if she knew about Nelson Ricci, about the $40 million in theft, disguised as corporate restructuring. But something in her expression warned me off. There were boundaries even in mentorship, lines that shouldn't be crossed. Regarding Lorenzo's offer, Carmen continued, I think you should seriously consider it. The experience would be invaluable, and the compensation would allow you to pay off your student loans years ahead of schedule. She knew about my loans. Of course she did. She'd reviewed my financial disclosure when I was hired. But the way she mentioned them now felt pointed, like a reminder of what I stood to gain. I'm concerned about the nature of the work, I said honestly. I don't want to compromise my ethics for money. Lorenzo's business interests are extensive and largely legitimate, Carmen replied. Yes, he operates in gray areas, but so do many of our clients. The difference is that he's upfront about it. He won't ask you to do anything illegal, and he'll pay you extremely well for your expertise. And if I refuse? Her expression softened. Then you refuse. Lorenzo is many things, but he's not vindictive toward people who've shown him loyalty through discretion. Your position here would be unaffected. I wanted to believe her, but the timing, the Marchetti case, the immediate offer, the way Lorenzo had known exactly what was on my desk, suggested a more complex situation. I need more time to think, I said. Of course. Carmen stood, signaling the end of our conversation. But Renata, don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. I returned to my desk, my mind churning. Emily had left another cappuccino, now cold, alongside a post-it note. You looked like you needed backup. E. The small kindness made my throat tight. My phone buzzed again. Thank you for catching that. You just saved the Marchettis from losing everything. And you demonstrated exactly why I need you. L. I stared at the message, anger flaring hot in my chest. He'd set me up. The case had been a test, a way to show me both the danger of the world I worked in and his power to protect me from it. The Marchetti fraud hadn't been an accident I'd stumbled across. It had been deliberately placed in front of me. My fingers flew across the keyboard. You manipulated me. His response came immediately. I showed you the truth. There are wolves in sheep's clothing all around you. At least I'm honest about having teeth. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I set it down carefully and returned to work, processing contracts and reviewing estate plans with mechanical precision. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of invisible strings pulling at my decisions. At lunch, I walked to a cafe 3 blocks away, needing distance from the office. The December air was sharp, carrying the scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor's cart. I ordered a panini I didn't want and sat by the window, watching pedestrians hurry past, wrapped in their winter coats and private concerns. A man in a black jacket had been standing across the street when I entered the cafe. He was still there 20 minutes later, seemingly engrossed in his phone, but never quite looking at the screen. When I finished my coffee and stood to leave, he straightened slightly, tracking my movement. One of Lorenzo's people. Had to be. I walked back to the office slowly, taking a deliberately indirect route. The man followed at a distance, professional but obvious. Lorenzo wanted me to know I was being watched. Whether for protection or control, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. The afternoon crawled by. Alice stopped by my desk at 4, her expression warm but assessing. Carmen mentioned Lorenzo's offer. It's a good opportunity, Renata. I hope you'll consider it seriously. Everyone knew. Everyone had apparently discussed my future before I'd even been consulted. The realization made me feel trapped, like the walls of the office were closing in. At 6, when most of my colleagues had left for the day, my phone rang. An actual call this time, not a text. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it would be before I answered. You've been thinking all day. Lorenzo's voice was smooth, that slight Italian accent making each word feel deliberate. I can practically hear your thoughts from here. Where is here? I asked, looking around the empty office. Somewhere with a view of your building. I wanted to check on you after you discovered my little test. It wasn't little, I snapped. You used me to intercept fraud. I gave you the opportunity to prevent fraud, he corrected, and you rose to the occasion beautifully. The Marchettis will never know how close they came to disaster. But I know. And now you know exactly what kind of sharks swim in your waters. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temples. Why are you doing this? Because in 1 week, something is going to happen. His tone shifted, becoming more serious. Nelson Ricci is making a move against several of the families I protect. He's using law firms like yours to legitimize his theft, and he's very good at it. The Marchetti case was just the beginning. There will be others. Then go to the police. With what evidence? Backdated documents that have already been corrected thanks to your diligent review. By the time authorities could investigate, Ricci would have laundered everything through a dozen shell companies. He paused. But if I had someone on the inside, someone with legal expertise and access to these filings before they're submitted, that person could stop him cold. Understanding dawned. You want me to be your spy. I want you to be my partner, he corrected. Someone who can identify these schemes before they succeed, who can protect innocent families from predators like Ricci. And yes, someone who can feed me information I can use to outmaneuver him. That's corporate espionage. That's justice, he countered. The legal kind moves too slowly and protects the powerful. My kind is faster and more effective. The question is whether you care more about the letter of the law or the spirit of it. I hated that his argument made sense. I hated more that he knew it would appeal to me, the part of me that had become a lawyer to help people, not to serve as a rubber stamp for wealthy criminals. 1 week, I said finally. You said something would happen in 1 week. What? Ricci is planning to move against me directly. Not just business, personal. He knows I've been watching him, and he knows I'm the only obstacle to his expansion. He'll try to eliminate that obstacle. Lorenzo's voice remained calm, but I heard the steel beneath it. And he knows the best way to hurt me is to hurt the people I care about. My breath caught. We barely know each other. But he doesn't know that. He's been watching me watch you. He saw me stop the elevator. He knows I've made you an offer. Which means as of last night, you became a target. The man in the black jacket. Not Lorenzo's guard, Ricci's surveillance. You put me in danger, I whispered. No, Renata. I exposed the danger you were already in. The moment you walked into that warehouse 3 months ago, the moment you saw what you saw, you became part of this world. I'm just offering you the tools to survive it. I wanted to argue, to insist that I could walk away, that I could refuse his offer and return to my simple life. But the Marchetti case had proved how naive that was. I was already involved, already compromised, whether I acknowledged it or not. "What do you need from me?" I asked, hating the resignation in my voice. "Meet me tomorrow night. 8 p.m. The address I'll text you. Come alone, and we'll discuss details. Bring any cases you think are suspicious. I'll help you identify which ones are Ricci's work. And if I don't come, then I'll respect your decision and do my best to keep you safe from a distance. But Renata?" His voice softened. "You're too smart to hide from this. You've already decided. You just need time to admit it to yourself." He ended the call before I could respond. I sat in the darkening office, my computer screen glowing softly in the evening shadows. Outside, Milan's lights were beginning to flicker on, the city transforming into its nighttime self, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure. My phone buzzed with an address in the Brera district, one of the city's most elegant neighborhoods. Of course, Lorenzo wouldn't meet me anywhere ordinary. I gathered my things slowly, methodically, trying to organize my thoughts. As I walked to my car, I noticed the man in the black jacket was gone, but I felt eyes on me anyway. Different eyes, belonging to different watchers. Lorenzo had been right about one thing. I'd already decided, not because of the money or even the sense of justice he'd appealed to, but because for the first time since starting at Hoffman and Associates, someone saw me as more than a junior associate, more than a replaceable cog in a corporate machine. He saw me as an equal, as someone whose mind, whose ethics, whose very specific skills were valuable enough to pursue, to protect, to risk exposure for. And that recognition, dangerous as it was, felt like oxygen after drowning. I drove home through evening traffic, checking my mirrors constantly, trying to identify which cars might be following me. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd counted at least 3 possibles, or none. Maybe I was just paranoid now. Inside my small studio, I made tea I didn't drink and stared at my law degree hanging on the wall. 4 years of school, 2 years of practice, mountains of debt, all to end up here, standing in a cramped apartment, contemplating whether to become a consultant to the Mafia. My phone lit up with one final message. "Sleep well, Renata. Tomorrow everything changes. L." I didn't sleep well. But I did sleep eventually, with my law book spread across my bed, and Lorenzo's words echoing in my mind. At least I'm honest about having teeth. In the morning, I would make my decision. But deep down, in the place where instinct lived beyond logic, I already knew what it would be. The elevator doors had opened, and I was already stepping through. The address Lorenzo had sent me belonged to a private art gallery in the Brera district, the kind of establishment that didn't advertise and accepted clients by invitation only. I stood outside at 7:55 p.m., my reflection distorted in the gallery's dark windows. I'd changed 3 times before leaving my apartment, finally settling on tailored black pants and a burgundy silk blouse. Professional enough for a business meeting, elegant enough for wherever this evening might lead. The door opened before I could knock. A woman in her 50s, dressed entirely in black, greeted me with a slight smile. "Signorina Ferreira, Mr. Colombo is expecting you. This way, please." She led me through the gallery's main room, past paintings that probably cost more than my lifetime earnings, into a private viewing chamber at the back. The space was intimate, lit by soft track lighting that illuminated a single massive canvas on the far wall, an abstract piece in blues and golds that seemed to shift as I moved. Lorenzo stood before it, his back to me, wearing dark slacks and a white shirt with those same 4 buttons undone. He turned when he heard my footsteps, and the intensity of his gaze made me falter mid-step. "You came," he said simply. "You didn't give me much choice." There's always a choice, Renata. You just chose to stop lying to yourself about what you want. He gestured to a small table near the painting, where 2 glasses and a bottle of wine waited. Please sit. We have much to discuss. I took the offered chair, accepting the wine he poured. The room felt too intimate, too much like a date rather than a business meeting. But maybe that was intentional. Lorenzo seemed to blur boundaries naturally, making everything personal whether you wanted it to be or not. Before we discuss Ricci, I said, needing to establish some control, I need to understand what happened 3 months ago. The warehouse. What was I really witnessing? Lorenzo settled into the chair across from me, cradling his wine glass. A transaction. Legal, technically, though the optics would have been problematic. We were consolidating assets from several family businesses, cash that needed to be accounted for before the fiscal year ended. And the men with guns? Security, standard for that amount of currency. He tilted his head, studying me. You're wondering if I deal in drugs, weapons, human trafficking, all the things Americans' movies suggest the Italian Mafia involves itself in. Do you? No. The single word was firm, final. My family built our influence over 3 generations through construction, real estate, and strategic political connections. We protect businesses that can't protect themselves from corrupt officials and rival organizations. Sometimes that protection requires force, but not the kind you're imagining. I wanted to believe him. The rational part of my brain warned against taking his word at face value. But something in his directness, the way he met my eyes without flinching, suggested truth. The warehouse wasn't the first time I'd seen you, Lorenzo continued, setting down his glass. You'd been working at Hoffman & Associates for about 6 months when I first noticed you. There was a reception for one of Alice's major clients, the Castellanis, textile empire, old money. You were there, making small talk with Giuseppe Castellani's wife, and she laughed at something you said. Really laughed, not the polite society laugh. I asked Alice about you afterward. My breath caught. You've been watching me for over a year? Not watching, aware of. There's a difference. He leaned forward slightly. In my world, knowledge is protection. I make it my business to know the key players in every firm, every bank, every institution that touches my interests. You were just another name on a list. But then the warehouse happened, and you became something more. Because I kept quiet? Because you looked at me like you were trying to solve a puzzle. His voice softened. Most people see the surface, wealth, power, danger. They make their judgments and move on. But you looked at me like there was something deeper worth understanding. Like I was a person, not just a category. The vulnerability in his words surprised me. For a moment, I glimpsed the man beneath the carefully constructed armor, someone who'd spent so long being feared that being seen felt radical. You're romanticizing it, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. I was terrified. You were cautious, different thing. He smiled slightly. And you're still here despite that caution. Tell me why. The question caught me off guard in its directness. I took a sip of wine, buying time to organize my thoughts. Because you were right about the Marchetti case, about the dangers I didn't see, and because I hesitated, then committed to honesty, because the work I do at the firm feels empty sometimes. I became a lawyer to help people, but most of my time is spent helping rich families get richer. And you think working with me will be different? I think it will be honest about what it is. You're not pretending to be something you're not. Lorenzo's expression shifted. Pleasure mixed with something deeper, more possessive. That's the difference between us and people like Ricci. We operate in shadows, yes, but we don't pretend to be legitimate while stabbing people in the back. We're upfront about the rules of our world. Tell me about Ricci, I said, steering us back to safer ground. What's his plan? He's been systematically acquiring businesses along the Milan waterfront, shipping companies, warehouses, distribution centers. On paper, it looks like normal expansion, but he's using fraud, intimidation, and strategic bankruptcies to force owners to sell at a fraction of value. The Marchetti case was part of a larger scheme to seize their real estate holdings. I pulled out my phone, opening the notes I'd compiled. I reviewed every case assigned to me in the last 6 months, found 3 others with similar irregularities, backdated documents, suspicious subsidiary companies, property transfers that don't make sense. Lorenzo's eyes gleamed with approval. Show me. For the next hour, we went through each case, Lorenzo explaining the context I couldn't see from the legal documents alone. The Bellini shipping company had refused Ricci's buyout offer. Suddenly their business permits were held up, their insurance canceled, their ships detained for inspections. The paperwork I'd been asked to file would have transferred their port access rights to a Ricci subsidiary, effectively destroying their business. If I flag these cases, won't that expose me? I asked. Ricci must have someone inside the firm feeding him information. Almost certainly. Which is why we need to be strategic. Lorenzo pulled out a tablet, showing me an organizational chart. These are the people at Hoffman & Associates with access to your case files. I've been investigating their finances, looking for unusual deposits or lifestyle changes that might indicate Ricci's bought them. The chart was extensive. Partners, senior associates, even administrative staff. Next to each name were notes about banking activity, property purchases, vacation patterns. The level of detail was invasive and thorough. Carmen, I asked, seeing my mentor's name highlighted. Clean. She's been approached by Ricci's people, but she refused every overture. That's actually why I felt comfortable involving her in bringing you into this. She has integrity, even if she's willing to work with people like me. The distinction mattered. Carmen might facilitate connections to Lorenzo's world, but she drew lines. It was a relief to know I hadn't completely misread her character. This one, Lorenzo tapped a name, Marcus Hoffman, one of the founding partners. 3 months ago, he purchased a villa in Tuscany. Cash. No mortgage. The price tag was 2 million euros. I stared at the file. Marcus was wealthy, but that kind of liquid cash was unusual. You think he's working with Ricci? I know he is. We just haven't been able to prove it in a way that wouldn't expose our investigation. Lorenzo looked at me meaningfully. But if a diligent junior associate happened to notice irregularities in cases he personally supervised, if she brought those concerns to Alice Taylor rather than to Marcus himself, I become the whistleblower. The implications unfolded in my mind. Alice investigates, discovers Marcus's betrayal, and Ricci loses his inside access. And you become untouchable. Alice will protect you because you protected the firm. Your career accelerates instead of ending. It was elegant, dangerous but elegant, and it would work. I could feel the logical progression clicking into place, but there was a cost to becoming a whistleblower, even a protected one. Office dynamics would shift. Marcus had allies among the partners. I'd be making enemies. What happens to Marcus? I asked. That depends on what Alice decides, but he won't be in a position to retaliate against you. Lorenzo's voice hardened slightly. I'll make certain of that. The implied threat hung between us. I should have been disturbed by his casual discussion of ensuring someone's silence. Instead, I felt a guilty relief. Whatever Lorenzo's methods, I wouldn't be left vulnerable. There's something else, Lorenzo said, his tone shifting. Ricci knows I've been protecting you. The surveillance you noticed yesterday, that was his people confirming the connection between us. He'll try to use you against me. How? Kidnapping, most likely. Or fabricating evidence that you're involved in my business illegally, forcing you to cooperate in exchange for his silence. He met my eyes directly. Which is why I need you to move. I blinked. Excuse me? Your apartment isn't secure. Too many access points, no proper surveillance system, neighbors who wouldn't notice if something happened. He pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. I have a property in the Porta Nuova district, a secure building with 24-hour concierge, camera system, controlled entry. 3 bedrooms, fully furnished. You'd have complete privacy, but with protection. I opened the folder to find photographs of a stunning modern apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, the kind of space I'd fantasized about but never imagined affording. I can't accept this. It's not a gift. You'd pay rent, a fair market rate based on your current salary, not the luxury rate. The difference comes from the consulting fee I'm paying you. Think of it as a business investment. I need you safe and focused, not worried about being grabbed on your way home. This is too much, Lorenzo. I pushed the folder back toward him. Moving into your property, working as your consultant, it feels like I'm being absorbed into your world entirely, like I'm losing my independence, or like you're gaining resources that match your value. He didn't touch the folder, leaving it between us. Renata, independence without security is just isolation. You've been operating alone, vulnerable, trying to prove you don't need help. But everyone needs allies, especially in the world you're now navigating. The world you pulled me into, I countered. The world you were already in, whether you admitted it or not. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I felt the heat of his skin. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you alive and free to make choices. Those aren't the same thing. I stared at our hands, separated by inches that felt like miles. What do you really want from me, Lorenzo? And don't tell me it's just legal consulting. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure yet. I know I want you safe. I know I want your mind working with mine instead of for some soulless firm that doesn't appreciate you. And I know. He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I know that when I'm near you, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Like there's a possibility of something beyond business, beyond obligation. Something real. My breath caught. The admission was more than I'd expected, more vulnerable than I'd thought him capable of. We barely know each other. I know you catch fraud other lawyers miss. I know you're brave enough to walk into a meeting with someone you should fear. I know you're loyal to the people you care about. Emily, Carmen, the hypothetical clients you wanted to help when you chose law school. I know you take your coffee with cream and no sugar, that you work late because you're trying to prove something, and that you looked at me in that warehouse like I was a person worth understanding. He finally closed the distance, his fingers covering mine. How much more do I need to know? The touch sent electricity through me. You researched my coffee order? I pay attention to details. It's how I've survived this long. His thumb traced a small circle on my hand. And you're the most interesting detail I've encountered in a very long time. I should pull away. Should establish boundaries, maintain professionalism, remember that this man was dangerous regardless of how compelling he was. But my hand stayed where it was, accepting his touch, accepting the connection forming between us. I'll move into the apartment, I heard myself say. On a trial basis. 1 month. If it doesn't feel right, I find somewhere else. Agreed. And I'll bring the suspicious cases to Alice. But Lorenzo, if this goes wrong, if Marcus retaliates or Ricci comes after me, you have to promise me something. Anything. That you'll let me handle it legally first. That violence is the last resort, not the first solution. Something complex moved across his face. Frustration, respect, maybe tenderness. You're asking me to fight with one hand tied behind my back. I'm asking you to trust that the law can work sometimes, that not every problem requires force." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll try it your way first, but if it fails, if you're in danger, I reserve the right to protect you by any means necessary." It wasn't complete capitulation, but it was more compromise than I'd expected from someone in his position. "Okay. Okay," he echoed, his hand still covering mine. We sat like that in the dim gallery, the abstract painting witnessing this strange alliance forming between us. Outside, Milan's night sounds filtered through. Distant traffic, voices in the street. The city continuing its rhythm, unaware of the tectonic shifts happening in this small, private space. "When do I move?" I asked finally. "This weekend. I'll arrange movers for Saturday." He released my hand, and I felt the loss of contact like a chill. "And Renata? Thank you for trusting me enough to say yes." "I haven't fully decided to trust you," I corrected. "But I'm willing to try. That's all I'm asking." He stood, offering me his hand to help me up. "Come on. I'll walk you to your car. I don't need an escort." "No, but you're getting one anyway. Ricci's people are still watching, and I want them to see that you're under my protection. Clear message. No room for misunderstanding." We left the gallery together, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back, possessive, but not controlling. The street was quiet. Milan's evening crowd thinned to occasional couples and late commuters. My car was parked 3 blocks away. As we walked, I became aware of the watchers Lorenzo had mentioned. A man reading a newspaper in a cafe that was closing. Another smoking by a doorway despite the cold. Lorenzo didn't acknowledge them, but I felt his awareness like a tangible force. "They won't approach while I'm with you," he said quietly. "But drive carefully. Vary your route home. And Renata, keep your phone on you always." "I do. I mean in your hand, not your purse. If anything feels wrong, call me immediately. I have people positioned throughout the city. Someone can reach you within minutes." The level of organization was both reassuring and unsettling. "You've been planning this. Since the day you walked into that warehouse." He stopped beside my car, turning to face me. "I told you. I've been aware of you for over a year. This isn't impulsive. This is strategic. And what am I in this strategy? Asset? Pawn?" "Partner," he said firmly. "Maybe something more, if you'll let it develop naturally. But first, partner." I unlocked my car, sliding into the driver's seat. Lorenzo leaned down, one hand on the doorframe, his face level with mine. "Drive safe. Text me when you're home." "I'm not checking in like a subordinate." "Then text me as someone who cares whether you arrived safely." He smiled slightly. "However you need to frame it, just let me know you're secure." Before I could respond, he closed my door and stepped back. I watched him in my rearview mirror as I pulled away. Tall, composed, absolutely in control of the space around him. 3 blocks later, I pulled over and gripped the steering wheel with shaking hands. What had I just agreed to? Moving into his property, becoming his consultant, entangling myself deeper in a world I'd spent my entire career trying to avoid. But then I thought about the Marchetti family, about the other cases I'd identified, about the justice that could happen if someone with legal knowledge and moral conviction worked within the system rather than outside it. I thought about Lorenzo's hand covering mine, his voice saying, "Partner?" His eyes looking at me like I was someone worth protecting, not because I was weak, but because I was valuable. My phone buzzed. "I'm watching your car on GPS. You pulled over. Everything okay?" L. Of course he'd put a tracker on my car. I should be outraged. Instead, I felt oddly comforted. At least I knew where I stood. Watched. Protected. Enrolled in something far bigger than myself. "Everything's fine. Just processing. R." Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. L. I pulled back into traffic, pointing my car toward home. My temporary home, I corrected. Soon I'd be in Porta Nuova, in a space Lorenzo had chosen, surrounded by security he'd arranged. The elevator doors had opened weeks ago. Tonight, I'd walked fully through them, and now there was no going back. The movers arrived at 8 a.m. Saturday, 4 men in matching uniforms who worked with military efficiency. I watched from my apartment doorway as they catalogued my belongings, which took remarkably little time, given how sparse my possessions were. 2 years in Milan, and I'd accumulated barely enough to fill their smallest truck. "Light packer," observed one of the men, a muscular guy with kind eyes. "Makes our job easy." I forced a smile, embarrassed by how little I owned. The contrast between my modest furniture and the luxury apartment awaiting me felt stark, uncomfortable, like I was a child playing dress-up in adult spaces. My phone buzzed. Lorenzo checking in for the 3rd time this morning. "Everything on schedule? Felix will meet you at the new building to handle keys and security protocols." L. Felix. I'd learned that name yesterday. Lorenzo's head of security, the man who'd been trailing me all week without my knowledge. The revelation had been unsettling, though Lorenzo had framed it as simple prudence. "You were being watched by Ricci's people. I needed to ensure you had protection, even before you agreed to work with me. Protection or surveillance?" The line blurred more each day. "Movers are almost done. I'll head over in 30 minutes. R." The apartment in Porta Nuova was everything the photographs had promised, and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Milan's modern skyline, the glass reflecting clouds that hung low and heavy with unspilled rain. The floors were heated marble, warm beneath my feet as I walked through rooms that echoed with emptiness despite the elegant furniture. Felix was waiting in the lobby when I arrived. Tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in military or security work. His handshake was firm but not crushing, his smile professional. "Signorina Ferreira, welcome. I'll walk you through the security features, then give you privacy to settle in." The tour was thorough. Cameras monitored every hallway and entrance, accessible via an app on my phone. The door had 3 separate locks, including a biometric scanner. Panic buttons were positioned in each room, connecting directly to Lorenzo's security network. The windows were reinforced glass, capable of withstanding significant impact. "It seems excessive," I said as Felix demonstrated the panic button in the master bedroom. "Mr. Colombo doesn't believe in half measures when it comes to protection." Felix's tone was neutral, but his eyes held something like approval. "Especially not for people he values." People he values. The phrase echoed after Felix left, as I unpacked boxes in rooms that smelled of new furniture and possibilities. What did it mean to be valued by Lorenzo Colombo, and why did the thought send both warmth and anxiety through my chest? By late afternoon, I'd established some sense of order, clothes in the massive walk-in closet, toiletries in the marble bathroom that was larger than my old bedroom, books arranged on shelves that had probably been empty for years. The apartment slowly absorbed my presence, my few possessions looking lost in all that space. I was arranging law journals on the living room bookshelf when the doorbell chimed. The video screen showed Lorenzo, dressed casually in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, holding 2 bags that emitted delicious smells. My pulse quickened as I opened the door. I didn't order food. "I know, I did." He walked past me with easy confidence, heading straight for the kitchen. "You've been moving all day. I thought you might appreciate not cooking tonight." I followed him, watching as he unpacked containers from Bice, one of Milan's most exclusive restaurants. Risotto alla Milanese, ossobuco, roasted vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven. The spread was elaborate, expensive, exactly the kind of meal I'd never think to order for myself. "This is too much," I said, though my stomach betrayed me with a loud growl. Lorenzo smiled. that slight curve of lips that made him look younger, less dangerous. "You haven't eaten since breakfast. I checked with Felix. No delivery orders, no grocery shopping. Were you planning to starve in your new apartment?" "I was planning to order pizza later." "Pizza has its place. Tonight, isn't it?" He began setting out plates, moving through my new kitchen like he belonged there. "Come on, sit. Tell me how the move went." We ate at the kitchen island, the cityscape sprawling beyond the windows as dusk settled over Milan. Lorenzo asked about the apartment, about which rooms I'd claimed as my own, about whether the security setup felt intrusive or reassuring. His questions were casual but attentive, creating space for conversation that felt almost normal. "The bedroom," I said, refilling our wine glasses. "It has a reading nook by the window. I've never had space for that before." "Then it's already better than the old place." He watched me over the rim of his glass. "You'll be comfortable here. Safe. Isolated," I added quietly. His expression shifted. "Is that how it feels?" "A little." This morning, Emily stopped by my old apartment to help with packing. She kept looking around at the fancy movers, the efficiency of it all, and I could see her wondering about where I was going, about why everything changed so suddenly. I set down my fork. I told her it was a consulting opportunity, that a client needed someone on call and provided housing. She didn't believe me. Friends rarely do. They sense when something fundamental shifts. Lorenzo leaned back, studying me. "Did you tell her the truth?" "What truth?" "That I'm working for a man whose business interests extend into areas I don't fully understand? That I've moved into his property because apparently I'm now valuable enough to warrant this level of protection?" The words came out sharper than intended. I don't even know what the truth is anymore. The truth is that you're exceptionally talented, and people are taking notice. Some want to exploit that talent, others want to nurture it. He paused. I'm in the latter category, in case that wasn't clear. Is that all I am to you? Talent to be nurtured? The question hung between us. Lorenzo set down his wine glass slowly, deliberately, his dark eyes never leaving mine. You know it's not. My breath caught. Then what am I? I'm still figuring that out. He stood, moving around the island until he was beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I know you're someone I think about constantly, someone whose safety matters more than strategic advantage, someone I want to know in ways that have nothing to do with business. Lorenzo, I know the timing is wrong. I know you're adjusting to everything, that this feels overwhelming. His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek with devastating gentleness. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about Ricci, or the cases, or even the security. Those are real concerns, yes, but they're also excuses to keep you close while I figure out how to tell you that His phone rang, cutting through the moment with jarring urgency. Lorenzo's expression shifted instantly from vulnerable to alert. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw made his jaw tighten. I need to take this. He stepped away, phone to his ear. Cosa è successo? The conversation was rapid Italian, too fast and colloquial for me to follow with my basic understanding. But I caught names: Ricci, Marcus, Alice, and Lorenzo's tone grew progressively darker. When he ended the call, his face was a mask. There's a situation. Ricci made his move earlier than expected. Ice flooded my veins. What kind of move? He's filed complaints with the Italian Bar Association against you, Carmen, and Alice, alleging that you've been fabricating evidence against Marcus Hoffman, that the cases you flagged were legitimate, and you're trying to damage his reputation out of personal vendetta. I stared at him. That's insane. I haven't even brought anything to Alice yet. He doesn't know that. He's acting preemptively, trying to discredit you before you can expose Marcus. Lorenzo's hand curled into a fist. It's a smart move. If the bar association investigates, even if they find nothing, the accusation alone damages your reputation. Firms don't like controversy. So I'm finished. The reality crashed over me. My career, everything I'd worked for, destroyed by a man I'd never even met. No. Lorenzo's voice was steel. You're protected. I've already made calls. People at the bar association who owe me favors. Journalists who can spin this as targeted harassment of a young lawyer who discovered fraud. By Monday morning, Ricci's complaint will look like exactly what it is. Retaliation. You can do that? Just make this go away? I can make certain you're not destroyed by it. Whether it goes away entirely depends on how aggressively Ricci pushes. He stepped closer, his hands settling on my shoulders. But Renata, this changes things. He's declared open war, which means the rules change. I need you to trust me to handle this. Handle it how? His expression went carefully blank. However necessary. Fear and anger warred in my chest. You promised me. Legal solutions first. That was before he tried to destroy your career, before you even made a move against him. Lorenzo's grip tightened slightly. He's not playing by rules anymore. Neither can we. There have to be lines, Lorenzo. Things we won't do, even to win. The lines are simple. I won't let him hurt you. Everything else is negotiable. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt a traitorous warmth. Someone was willing to fight for me, to risk exposure and consequence for my protection. When had anyone done that before? What do you need me to do? I asked. Stay here. Don't go to the office Monday. I'll handle Alice, explain the situation. You focus on compiling every suspicious case you've found, building an airtight documentation of Marcus's involvement with Ricci. When we're ready to move, it'll be with overwhelming evidence. And in the meantime, you're under protection. Felix and his team will rotate shifts outside this building. You don't leave without security. You don't meet with anyone I haven't vetted. He paused. I know it feels like prison, but it's temporary, until we neutralize the threat. How long is temporary? Days. Maybe a week. His hands slid from my shoulders to frame my face, tilting my head back so I had to meet his eyes. I will fix this, Renata. I promise. The intensity in his gaze stole my breath. Why does this matter so much to you? I'm just a lawyer you've known for a few weeks. You're not just anything. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're someone who looked at me and saw possibility instead of just danger. Someone brilliant enough to catch what others miss, brave enough to step into my world despite every reason to run. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. Lorenzo, I'm falling for you. The words were raw, honest, stripping away every layer of calculated charm. I've been falling since that moment in the warehouse, and every conversation since has only made it worse. So no, this isn't just about business or strategy. This is about keeping safe the one person who's made me feel human in years. Tears pricked my eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. Tell me you don't feel this too. Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll step back. I'll keep you safe, honor our professional arrangement, and never cross this line again. But if there's any part of you that feels what I feel, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Because he was right. I did feel it. The pull between us. The way his proximity made my pulse race. The dangerous hope that maybe this complicated, impossible man could be something more than a strategic alliance. I feel it, I whispered. God help me. I feel it too. His kiss was inevitable, a collision of need and restraint. His lips were warm, firm, moving against mine with a hunger that had been building for weeks. I responded without thinking, my hands fisting in his sweater, pulling him closer as every rational objection dissolved. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against mine. We should stop. Probably. You're vulnerable right now, under stress. I don't want to take advantage. You're not. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm making a choice, Lorenzo. Maybe not a smart one, but it's mine. Something fierce and possessive flared in his expression. Then choose, because once we cross this line, once I have you, I won't be able to let you go. You need to understand that about me. I understand. And I did. Lorenzo didn't do anything by halves. Not protection, not business, not whatever this was growing between us. If I said yes now, I was saying yes to all of it. Your room or mine? His voice was rough, barely controlled. This is your apartment. No, it's yours now. Every room, every space. I'm just a guest here, Renata. You call the shots. The surrender in his words, the way he gave me power in the one area where he could, made my decision. My room. But Lorenzo, don't make me regret this. Never. He caught my hand, bringing it to his lips. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever complications come, tonight, you're mine, and I'm yours. Nothing else matters. He led me toward the master bedroom, and I followed without hesitation, knowing I was stepping into deeper water, knowing I might drown, but trusting him to hold me above the surface. The morning would bring consequences, complications, the reality of what I'd chosen. But tonight, with Lorenzo's hands gentle on my skin and his voice murmuring promises in Italian against my neck, I let myself believe that maybe some risks were worth taking, that maybe being valued, protected, and desired by a dangerous man was better than being safe and alone. The city lights glittered beyond my windows, Milan stretching out below us, indifferent and eternal. And in this high tower, in this borrowed space that was becoming mine, I surrendered to something I'd been fighting since that first elevator ride. Not to Lorenzo's control, but to the possibility that we might build something real from this impossible beginning. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and Lorenzo's arm draped across my waist. For a moment, disoriented by sleep, I forgot where I was. Then memory returned in a rush. The move, the dinner, Ricci's attack, and what had followed after. Lorenzo stirred beside me, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw me watching him, a smile transformed his face from dangerous to devastatingly handsome. Buongiorno, Bella. Morning. My voice came out raspy. What time is it? Just past 8. He propped himself on one elbow, studying me with an intensity that made me hyper-aware of my tangled hair and bare face. How are you feeling? Honestly, confused, nervous, maybe slightly terrified. I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. Last night was unexpected. Regretted? His tone was careful, neutral, but I saw tension in his shoulders. No, but complicated. I met his gaze. Everything's happening so fast, Lorenzo. 2 weeks ago, I was just a junior associate. Now I'm in your apartment, in your bed, involved in corporate espionage and mob politics. It's a lot. I know. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. If I could slow it down, give you time to adjust, I would. But Ricci forced the timeline. He made you a target, which means protecting you had to accelerate. Is that all last night was? Protection? You know it wasn't. His hand cupped my cheek. Last night was me being selfish, wanting you too much to maintain professional distance. But Renata, if it's too much, if you need space, I don't want space. The admission surprised me with its certainty. I want to understand what I've gotten into. All of it. Not just the business with Ricci, but your world. The empire you've built. How it really works. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Most people don't want to know. They prefer deniability. I'm not most people. No, you're not. He sat up, the sheet pooling at his waist. Okay, you want the truth? I'll give it to you. But once you know, you can't unknow it. Your illusions about noble criminals working for justice, those might not survive. I'm not naive enough to have illusions. We'll see. He stood, unself-conscious in his nudity, and walked to the window. Milan sprawled below us, the city waking to Sunday morning routines. My grandfather came to Milan from Sicily in 1952. He had nothing, no education, no connections, just willingness to work and an understanding of how power really operates. He started in construction, greasing palms to get contracts, ensuring projects finished on time by discouraging union disputes. I listened, pulling on a robe as Lorenzo spoke. By the time my father inherited, the family controlled most of the city's construction. But my father wanted more: political influence, financial reach beyond Italy. So he diversified. Real estate development, private security firms, consultation services, all legitimate, all profitable. But the foundation was still the same. We controlled resources others needed, and we extracted payment for that control. Protection money, I said quietly. Sometimes. More often favors. A judge who owed us would rule favorably on permit disputes. A politician we'd supported would ensure zoning changes went through. A banker we'd helped would approve loans for our associates. He turned to face me. It's not violence, Renata. It's influence. The same game every powerful family plays, just more efficiently. And when influence doesn't work, then we escalate, but carefully. The goal is always to avoid bloodshed. It's messy, unpredictable, and draws attention. We prefer financial pressure, reputational damage, strategic obstacles that make cooperation more appealing than resistance. I thought about the warehouse, the cash transactions, the careful orchestration of Lorenzo's world. And Ricci? How does he operate differently? Lorenzo's expression darkened. Ricci is new money, no patience for the slow game. He uses violence as a first tool, not a last resort. Intimidation, threats against families, strategic brutality that terrorizes people into compliance. It's effective short-term, but it creates enemies. Like you, like me. He moved to sit beside me on the bed. I've been trying to push him out of Milan for 2 years. He's got his hooks in shipping, which gives him leverage over imports and exports. He's been systematically destroying competitors, and now he's targeting the families I protect. Why does he want me? I'm just a lawyer. Because you're connected to me, and because you have access to legal mechanisms he can't easily control. If he can discredit you, he discredits any evidence you might uncover against Marcus. It's strategic, brutal, and typically Ricci. I processed this, pieces clicking into place. So, what's your plan? Expose Marcus completely, cut Ricci's access to legal legitimization, then apply financial pressure. I've been buying up debts Ricci owes, consolidating his obligations to companies I control. When the moment's right, I call those debts simultaneously. He'll be forced to liquidate assets, which weakens his position. That's elegant, I admitted. No violence, just economics. That's always been my preference. Violence is expensive and imprecise. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. But Renata, you need to understand. If he threatens you directly, if he moves against you physically, I will respond with force. That's non-negotiable. The absolute certainty in his voice sent a shiver through me. I don't want people hurt because of me. Then we make sure it doesn't come to that. He kissed my knuckles. Which means you stay here, stay safe, and let me handle the external pressures. Can you do that? It felt like surrender. But looking at Lorenzo's face, seeing the genuine concern beneath the calculated strategy, I found myself nodding. For now. But Lorenzo, I want to be involved in planning, in strategy. Not just protected, but participating. Pride flickered in his expression. Done. In fact, I could use your legal perspective on something. He stood, pulling on his discarded clothes. Get dressed. I'll make coffee, and we'll go through some files I've been compiling. 20 minutes later, showered and caffeinated, I sat at the kitchen island while Lorenzo spread documents across the marble surface. They were Marcus Hoffman's financials, bank statements, property records, transaction histories spanning 5 years. I need you to identify which transactions might be flaggable, Lorenzo explained. Things that would seem suspicious to someone with legal training but not obviously criminal to a casual observer. I scanned the papers, my lawyer's eye catching irregularities immediately. Here, 3 cash deposits just under the reporting threshold. Classic structuring to avoid attention. Can you prove it? If I had access to his other accounts, could establish a pattern. I pulled out my phone. Actually, I might know someone who can help. My law school roommate works in financial compliance at BNP Paribas. She owes me a favor. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. You're willing to use personal connections? You're not the only one with resources. I started composing a carefully worded message to Rachel. If we're doing this, we do it thoroughly. For the next 3 hours, we worked in focused synchronization. Lorenzo provided context for transactions. I identified legal vulnerabilities. He made calls in rapid Italian. I drafted documentation of irregularities. The partnership felt natural, balanced, our skills complementing each other's. By early afternoon, we had a comprehensive file on Marcus's dealings with Ricci. Enough evidence to trigger a bar association investigation and probably criminal charges. This is good work, Lorenzo said, reviewing my summary. Better than good. With this, Alice can remove Marcus from the firm, file charges, and protect the firm's reputation. When do we deliver it? Tomorrow. I'll arrange a meeting with Alice. Private, secure location. You present the evidence. I provide context about Ricci's operations. He looked at me seriously. This makes you untouchable, Renata. Alice will be grateful, protective. Your career accelerates instead of ending. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the weight of what we'd done, using my legal training to help dismantle someone's life, even if that someone was corrupt. The gray area Lorenzo had mentioned wasn't theoretical anymore. You're having second thoughts, Lorenzo observed. Not second thoughts, just awareness of consequences. Marcus will lose everything. His career, probably his freedom. He chose this. He aligned with Ricci, betrayed his firm, facilitated fraud that hurt innocent people. Lorenzo's voice was firm. You're not destroying him, Renata. You're stopping him from destroying others. He was right. I knew he was right. But the discomfort remained, a reminder that this world Lorenzo inhabited didn't allow for simple morality. My phone buzzed. Rachel, responding to my earlier message. Found something interesting in those account numbers you sent. Can we talk? Private call? I glanced at Lorenzo, who nodded. I stepped into the bedroom for privacy, closing the door before calling Rachel. Ren, what are you into? Rachel's voice was tight with concern. Those accounts you sent me, they're flagged in our system. Money laundering, organized crime connections, the whole criminal buffet. I know. That's why I needed confirmation. Are you in trouble? Because if someone's pressuring you, I'm okay. Actually, I'm helping expose it. But Rachel, I need something else. Can you trace where the money in those accounts originated? Rachel was quiet for a moment. That's asking me to break about 6 regulations. I know. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. How important we talking? Because my job important? Or someone's life important? I thought about Ricci's threats, about the families whose businesses he was destroying, about Lorenzo risking exposure to protect people he'd never met. Lives. Multiple lives. Shit, Ren. A long pause. Okay. I'll see what I can do. But you owe me more than a favor after this. You owe me the full story over very expensive wine. Deal. Thank you, Rach. When I returned to the living room, Lorenzo was on his phone, speaking in low, urgent Italian. He ended the call as I approached, his expression grave. What's wrong? Ricci just moved against the Castellani family, the textile empire I mentioned. He's filed false insurance claims on their warehouses, then had them burned to collect the payout. The Castellanis will be bankrupted by the investigation alone. Horror washed through me. He burned warehouses? Were people inside? No, thankfully. He's brutal but not stupid. Murder investigations draw too much attention. But the Castellanis employed over 200 people. Those jobs are gone. Families ruined. Can we stop him? Not directly, but we can make sure the insurance fraud is documented, tie it back to him through financial records. Lorenzo's jaw was set. This is what I mean about escalation. He's not targeting me anymore. He's targeting everyone connected to my protection network, destroying them to weaken me. Then we need to move faster. Present everything to Alice tomorrow. Get Marcus removed immediately. Cut Ricci's legal access before he can do more damage. Lorenzo studied me. You're sure? Once we move, there's no going back. Ricci will know you're the source of his exposure. I'm sure. And I was. Whatever doubts I'd had about participating in Lorenzo's world had evaporated when faced with Ricci's callousness. But Lorenzo? After this, after we stop him, I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll consider whether there's a way out, a way to transition your influence into something fully legitimate, without the gray areas. I moved closer to him. I'm not naive. I know you can't just walk away. But long term, for us to work, I need to believe we're moving toward the light, not deeper into shadow. His hand came up to cup my face. You're asking me to change my entire life. I'm asking you to evolve it. Keep the protection, keep the influence, but find ways to make it legal. Real security consulting, legitimate real estate, political advocacy instead of backroom deals. That would take years, maybe decades. I know. But if you can promise me you'll try, if you can show me we're heading in that direction. I took a breath. Then I can see a future for us. A real one. Lorenzo was quiet for so long, I feared I'd pushed too far. Then he kissed me, deep and claiming, before pulling back to look into my eyes. I'll try. Not just because you're asking, but because you make me want to be someone worthy of you. His smile was crooked, vulnerable. Though I make no promises about speed, turning an empire is like turning a ship, slow and complicated. I can work with slow and complicated. I smiled back. I'm a lawyer. Complicated is my specialty. We spent the rest of the day preparing for tomorrow's meeting with Alice, refining our presentation, anticipating objections. Felix brought dinner, another elaborate meal I hadn't requested but appreciated. Lorenzo stayed late, ostensibly to work, but I suspected the real reason was simpler. Neither of us wanted to be apart. When he finally left at midnight, my apartment felt too large, too empty. I stood at the windows, watching the city lights, and wondered how in 2 weeks my entire life had transformed. Tomorrow would bring exposure, confrontation, consequences. But tonight, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Hope that Lorenzo and I might actually build something real. Hope that stopping Ricci could make a genuine difference. Hope that the gray areas I'd been navigating might eventually fade to clearer moral territory. My phone glowed with a final message from Lorenzo. "Sleep well, Bella. Tomorrow we change everything. L." I smiled, typing back. "Together. R." Because that was the truth I'd discovered in these chaotic weeks. Alone, I was vulnerable. But with Lorenzo, I was formidable. And Ricci was about to discover exactly how dangerous we could be when we worked as one. The meeting with Alice was set for 9 a.m. at a private dining room in Hotel Principe di Savoia. Neutral ground, secure, with enough elegance to underscore the seriousness of what we were discussing. I dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit, my armor against the professional judgment I'd face. Lorenzo picked me up at 8, his expression tense but determined. "Ready?" he asked as I slid into his car. "As ready as I'll ever be." I clutched my briefcase, which contained copies of all the evidence we'd compiled. "What's our approach?" "You present the legal findings. I provide context about Ricci's operations. Alice asks questions. We answer honestly." He glanced at me. "She's going to be shocked, probably angry that this was happening under her nose, but she'll protect the firm above all else. Even if it means sacrificing Marcus, especially then. He's a liability now." The hotel was elegant, old-world European luxury that spoke of Milan's history and refinement. Alice was already waiting in the private dining room when we arrived, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression neutral but watchful. "Lorenzo, Renata." She stood, shaking our hands formally. I'll admit, when Lorenzo called to request this meeting, I was intrigued and concerned. "Thank you for making time," I said, settling into the chair Lorenzo pulled out for me. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Alice replied. "What's this about?" I opened my briefcase, withdrawing the file we'd prepared. Over the past 3 weeks, I've identified several cases assigned to me that contain legal irregularities. Backdated documents, suspicious property transfers, corporate structures designed to obscure ownership. Initially, I thought they were simple errors, but the pattern was too consistent. Alice's eyes sharpened. "Show me." For the next 30 minutes, I walked her through each case, the Marchettis, the Bellinis, 3 others I'd discovered. Alice's expression grew progressively darker as I explained the fraud, the systematic theft disguised as legitimate business. "These all came through Marcus's client list," she said finally, her voice cold. "You're telling me one of my founding partners has been facilitating fraud." "Not just facilitating," Lorenzo interjected. "Profiting from it. Marcus has been working with Nelson Ricci, providing legal legitimization for property seizures and corporate takeovers. In exchange, Ricci has been paying him substantial sums, enough to purchase a Tuscan villa with cash 3 months ago." Alice's face went rigid. "You investigated Marcus?" "I investigate everyone who might threaten my interests," Lorenzo said calmly. "And when Ricci started targeting the families I protect, Marcus's connection became relevant. This is extraordinary." Alice stood, pacing to the window. "If this is true, the reputational damage to the firm can be contained," I interrupted, "if we move quickly. Remove Marcus immediately, cooperate fully with authorities, present ourselves as the victims of his deception. The firm comes out looking vigilant, not complicit." Alice turned to study me. "And what's your role in this, Renata? Why are you presenting this with Lorenzo rather than bringing it to me privately?" I'd prepared for this question. "Because Ricci has already moved against me. He filed complaints with the Bar Association, trying to preemptively discredit me before I could expose Marcus. Lorenzo's been providing protection and legal counsel." "Protection." Alice's gaze moved between us, assessing. "Is that all he's been providing?" Heat rose to my cheeks, but I held her stare. "Lorenzo and I have developed a professional relationship. Don't insult my intelligence, Renata." Alice's voice was sharp. "I've been practicing law for 30 years. I recognize personal involvement when I see it. The question is whether that involvement compromises your professional judgment. It doesn't, Lorenzo said firmly. Renata's findings are solid. Every irregularity she's identified is real, documented, legally actionable. Her relationship with me doesn't change the evidence. Perhaps not, but it changes the optics. Alice returned to her seat. If we move against Marcus based on information you've provided, Lorenzo, people will question our motives. They'll say we're doing your bidding. Then verify it independently, I urged. Have your own forensic accountants review the cases. The fraud is there, Alice. Marcus has been betraying the firm for at least 2 years. Alice was silent, her fingers drumming against the table. Finally, she said, I'll need 24 hours to conduct my own review. If what you're saying is accurate, I'll move against Marcus immediately. But Renata? Her gaze locked on mine. Your career at this firm may not survive this. Even if you're right, even if Marcus is guilty, you'll always be the associate who brought down a founding partner. Colleagues will see you as a threat. I understand. Do you? Alice's expression softened slightly. You're brilliant, Renata. I've known that since I hired you. But brilliance attracts enemies as much as admirers. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the past weeks, about Ricci's threats and Lorenzo's protection, about the life I'd left behind and the uncertain future ahead. I'm prepared to do what's right. The rest, I'll handle as it comes. Alice nodded slowly. Then we'll proceed. Lorenzo, I'll need access to your financial intelligence on Marcus. Everything you have, properly documented. I'll have it couriered within the hour. Good. Alice stood, signaling the meeting's end. Renata, take the rest of the week off. Let me handle the internal investigation without you being visible. Come back Monday, and we'll discuss your future here. It wasn't reassurance, but it wasn't dismissal either. I accepted it gratefully. Lorenzo and I left the hotel in silence, the weight of what we'd set in motion pressing down on both of us. In the car, he finally spoke. You were perfect in there. Professional, composed, persuasive. I don't feel perfect. I feel like I just destroyed someone's life. You exposed corruption. There's a difference. His hand found mine. And you protected innocent people, the Marchettis, the Bellinis, others who would have been victimized. That matters, Renata. I wanted to believe him, but the discomfort remained, a reminder that righteous actions could still feel morally complicated. My phone buzzed. Rachel. Got that trace you wanted. Money originated from offshore accounts linked to shipping operations. Definitely organized crime. Sending details to your secure email. Rachel came through, I told Lorenzo, reading the message. We'll have evidence linking Ricci's payments to Marcus directly. Excellent. That closes the loop. He pulled the car over suddenly, putting it in park despite us being blocks from my apartment. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He turned to face me fully. I need to say something before we're in deeper. Before things get more complicated. My heart rate accelerated. Okay. These past weeks with you have been unexpected. I approached you as a strategic asset initially. Someone useful, skilled, worth cultivating. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being strategy. His hand came up to cup my face. You challenge me, Renata. You make me question the methods I've always accepted. The gray areas I've navigated without conscience. You make me want to be better. Lorenzo. Let me finish. His thumb traced my cheekbone. I know this is fast. I know the circumstances are bizarre. But I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. Not possession, not strategic alliance. Real affection, real respect, maybe even... He paused, seeming to search for words. Maybe even love. I don't know. I've never felt anything like this before. Tears pricked my eyes. I feel it too, and it terrifies me. Why? Because I don't know how to be with someone like you. I don't know how to navigate your world without compromising everything I believe in. I'm afraid I'll wake up one day and realize I've become someone I don't recognize. Lorenzo pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. Then we make sure that doesn't happen. We establish boundaries, maintain your integrity, build something that honors both our needs. It won't be easy, but Renata... His voice broke slightly. I think you're worth the effort. I kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't articulate into the contact. Relief, fear, affection, hope. All of it transmitted through lips and breath and the desperate press of bodies in a car parked on a Milan side street. When we finally separated, both breathing hard, Lorenzo smiled. We should go. I have calls to make, evidence to prepare for Alice. And I have nervous energy to burn off somehow. His smile turned wicked. I can think of a few ways to help with that. Heat flooded through me. Drive faster. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lorenzo making strategic calls while I researched legal precedents, both of us working from my apartment in focused synchronization, interrupted by moments of stolen intimacy. By evening, we'd prepared a comprehensive package for Alice that left no doubt about Marcus's guilt. She'll move against him tomorrow, Lorenzo predicted, reviewing our work. Marcus will be suspended. Investigation initiated. By week's end, he'll be formally expelled from the firm and facing criminal charges. And Ricci? Without legal legitimization, his operations become much more vulnerable. I've already started calling in his debts. By next month, he'll be financially crippled. Lorenzo set down the papers, his expression satisfied. We did it, Renata. We protected the families, exposed the corruption, and you secured your position at the firm. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt exhausted. Why doesn't it feel like winning? Because you have a conscience. You understand that even justified actions have costs. He pulled me onto the couch beside him. That's what makes you different from men like Ricci. You feel the weight of your choices. Do you? Sometimes, more now than before. His arm circled my shoulders. You've infected me with morality, Bella. It's deeply inconvenient. I laughed despite everything. Sorry, not sorry. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker to life as dusk settled over Milan. My phone chimed with an email notification. Alice confirming she'd received our evidence package and would act immediately. It's really happening, I murmured. It is. And Renata? Lorenzo turned to look at me. Whatever comes next, whatever complications arise, I want you to know something. You're not alone in this. You have me, my resources, my protection, always. The absoluteness of his promise should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt like coming home. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? Signorina Ferreira. The voice was unfamiliar, male, with a thick Italian accent. My name is Nelson Ricci. I believe we should meet. Ice flooded my veins. Lorenzo tensed beside me, having heard the name. I have nothing to say to you, I managed. Oh, but I have much to say to you. About your involvement with Colombo, about the evidence you've been compiling against Marcus, about the precarious position you've placed yourself in. His voice was smooth, almost friendly. I'm a reasonable man, Signorina. I believe we can reach an understanding that benefits us both. I'm not interested in understanding with you, not even to protect those you care about. Your friend Emily from the firm, your college roommate Rachel, your elderly parents in the countryside. So many people could be affected by your choices. Rage and fear warred in my chest. If you threaten them, I'm not threatening, I'm observing. Consequences have a way of rippling outward, affecting the innocent. A pause. Meet with me. Tomorrow, noon, the Giardini Pubblici. Come alone and we'll discuss how to resolve this situation peacefully. She won't be meeting you, Lorenzo said, taking the phone from me. And Ricci, if you go near anyone she cares about, you'll discover exactly how much I'm willing to sacrifice to protect what's mine. He ended the call, his expression murderous. He threatened my parents, I whispered, trembling. Emily, Rachel, people who have nothing to do with this. He's desperate, cornered. This is exactly what I feared. Lorenzo pulled me against his chest, his arms tight around me. We accelerate the timeline. I'll have people protecting everyone you care about by tonight. No one touches them, Renata. I promise. This is my fault. I should have stayed out of it. No. His voice was fierce. You did the right thing. Ricci is the villain here, not you, not us. But guilt still gnawed at me. My choices had put innocent people at risk. I should meet him, I said. Find out what he wants. Absolutely not. Lorenzo's grip tightened. He'll either try to intimidate you or worse. I won't risk it. Then what do we do? We end this. Tonight. He pulled out his phone, making a call in rapid Italian. When he finished, he looked at me gravely. I'm calling in every favor, activating every resource. By morning, Ricci's financial empire will collapse. He'll be too busy fighting for survival to threaten anyone. That's not legal solutions first, I pointed out. Legal solutions take time we don't have. He threatened your family, Renata. That changes everything. I wanted to argue, to insist on doing things the right way. But fear for my parents, for Emily and Rachel, overrode principle. Do what you have to do, I whispered. Just keep them safe. Lorenzo kissed my forehead. I will. I promise. The next 12 hours were the longest of my life. Lorenzo left at midnight to coordinate his response to Ricci, leaving Felix and 2 other guards stationed outside my apartment. I tried to sleep but couldn't, checking my phone obsessively for updates from Emily, Rachel, my parents. At 3 a.m., Lorenzo texted, Your parents have security now. They don't know, but they're safe. Same with Emily and Rachel. Breathe, Bella. At 6 a.m., Ricci's accounts frozen, his assets being seized for unpaid debts. He's falling apart. At 9 a.m., Alice called. Renata, are you all right? Marcus was arrested this morning at his home. He's claiming you and Lorenzo framed him, that the evidence was fabricated. It wasn't, I said firmly. Every document I showed you is authentic. Let him claim conspiracy. It won't change the facts. I know. The forensic team confirmed everything. Marcus is finished. She paused. But Renata, there's something else. Nelson Ricci contacted the firm this morning, threatening legal action against us for defamation. He's desperate. I know. He called me directly yesterday. What? Alice's voice sharpened. Renata, you need to file a police report. That's harassment, possibly intimidation. Lorenzo's handling it. Lorenzo is not law enforcement. Her tone was stern. I understand he's been protective, but there are proper channels. Alice, with respect, proper channels won't stop Ricci fast enough. Lorenzo's methods are more efficient. Silence. Then, carefully, are you certain about this path you're on? Once you're identified as Lorenzo's associate, it changes how people see you. I know. I've made my choice. Then I hope it's the right one, for your sake. She ended the call. At noon, when Ricci was supposed to meet me in the gardens, Lorenzo arrived at my apartment instead. It's over, he announced, looking exhausted but satisfied. Ricci filed for bankruptcy this morning. His organization is dissolving, his allies abandoning him. He's finished, Renata. Relief crashed over me. And the people he threatened? Still under protection until we're certain his network is completely dismantled. But the immediate danger has passed. I collapsed onto the couch, adrenaline finally fading. We did it. You did it. Lorenzo sat beside me, pulling me against his side. Your evidence exposed Marcus, which cut off Ricci's legal access. Everything else followed from that. We did it together, I corrected. I couldn't have survived this alone. You won't have to survive anything alone. Not anymore. He tilted my face up to his. Renata Ferreira, brilliant lawyer, conscience of my empire, woman who's made me want to be better. Will you stay with me? Not just for safety, not just for strategy, but because we're building something real? Tears spilled down my cheeks. Yes. But Lorenzo, I need you to keep evolving, keep moving toward legitimacy. I will. It'll take time, but I promise. Every year will be more legitimate, less gray, for you, for us, for the future we're building. I kissed him then, pouring all my relief and hope and affection into the contact. When we finally separated, both smiling, I said, "So what happens now?" Now, we live. You return to work. I reorganize my operations to be more legitimate. We figure out how to build a life together that honors both our values. He grinned. Simple, really. Nothing about this is simple. No, but it's ours. And that's enough. 3 weeks later, I stood in Alice's office accepting a promotion to senior associate. Marcus was in prison awaiting trial. Ricci had fled Italy entirely, his empire in ruins. The families Lorenzo protected were safe, thriving even. And I was in love with a former mob boss who was slowly, carefully transforming his empire into something we could both be proud of. Not a fairy tale, not a simple happy ending, but a beginning. Complicated, imperfect, ours. Lorenzo was waiting outside the firm when I finished work, leaning against his car with flowers in hand. When he saw me, his face transformed with that smile that still made my pulse race. Ready to go home, Bella? Home. Our apartment in Porta Nuova, the space we'd gradually filled with both our belongings until it felt truly ours. Ready, I agreed, taking his hand. As we drove through Milan's evening traffic, I thought about the woman I'd been just months ago. Alone, struggling, invisible. And the woman I was now. Protected. Valued. Building something extraordinary with someone extraordinary. The elevator had been the beginning. But this partnership, this love, this life, was the destination I'd never known I was searching for. And I'd arrived exactly where I belonged.